of the temple and then placed Prabhupada on his Vyasasana for the Guru Puja. So I remember when they carried Prabhupada into the temple room, one of our god brothers, his name was Puri Das, he was the pujari for Gaur-Nitai. And either it was at the beginning of the arti or at the end of the arti, I'm not really sure. The last arti, it was the Shayan arti. Puri was on the altar with the conch shell in his hand. I remember Puri turned and he saw Prabhupada on the palanquin, and Puri fainted right on the spot in front of Gaur-Nitai. And they put the palanquin right up on Prabhupada's Vyasasana. The palanquin just fit up there quite perfectly. Bhavananda, who had been caring for Prabhupada through Prabhupada's final pastimes and had been with him and, had been giving such a strong face and such a strong appearance. I remember when they put Prabhupada on the Vyasasana, Bhavananda went behind the Vyasasana and he just collapsed and he started sobbing like a child. And the Gaudiya Mat devotees, they were leading kirtan. And when they sing Jayanila Premadana, I remember I personally collapsed. And the devotees, practically they couldn't sing because everyone was crying so much. And there was a succession of bhajans and kirtans, and everyone offered garlands and flower petals to Prabhupada. I remember people from the city, they were coming and they were offering. And then through the course of the night, the kirtans went on. And because I knew that I had to cook the next day, I sort of tuned out about midnight and I went and took rest for a couple hours. And I was told that in the middle of the night, they didn't know who to ask to lead bhajan. And I was told they turned to this little man that had been there the whole time. And I say the majority of the devotees, they didn't know who he was. And it was Srila Kinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. And I was told that they asked him, Prabhu, could you sing? And he picked up the mridanga and he started singing. And because his singing was so pure, and it was so full of love for his friend Prabhupada and for Radha and Krishna, everyone collapsed again. And then we went for the Mangal Artik, and the Mangal Artik at Krishna Balaram Mandir that morning was led by Anand Prabhu, Prabhupada's godbrother. And then after the Mangal Artik, then they took Prabhupada for his last parikrama.
At first light after Mangalati, the devotees took Prabhupada in a palanquin. I remember Narayan Maharaj was leading the kirtan, Nadi was playing drum, and I had kartals. We went all the way down to Vrindavan, and then of course then I noticed all these hundreds of people that came from nowhere. I couldn't figure that everyone had heard, or if they had heard that Prabhupada left. I never saw Vrindavan in such a mood that everyone came out to pay homage. It was so early in the morning. The rooftops were packed wherever we went. And we took Prabhupada to all the Goswami temples of Vrindavan, Madan Mohan, Radha Damodar, Radha Shyamsundar. And we ended up at Govindaji. And from Govindaji, we came back from there.
There's two things that Srila Prabhupada gave me. One was personal association, and the other was some attachment for Vrindavan for whatever reason. And Upendra got in touch with me when Prabhupada was in Vrindavan and was starting to become very sick, and it became very clear he was going to leave soon. And I actually went to Vrindavan and spent time with him there. That was the first time I ever went to India. And courtesy of Tamal Krishna, I got to spend a lot of time with Srila Prabhupada personally. And I was able to do little things to help. And that was a remarkable time. There was one moment in particular which stands out and has always remained with me, that Normally Srila Prabhupada would give instruction in a very straightforward way by speaking to you. But by now he was very, very sick, and he actually had to be picked up and rolled over in bed and carried. You know, he was getting ready to leave. And I'll never forget this. We're on the roof of his apartment in Vrindavan, and my job was to burn. We had a pot of, I'm not quite sure what it was, but I was burning it to keep the mosquitoes away. And there was peacocks cawing in the background, and the smells of Vrindavan, and the feeling of the air and the weight of warmth that the air in India has. And I was sitting at Srila Prabhupada's feet, looking along his body at him, and I just had a moment, like I guess a cathartic moment, and I didn't speak outwardly, but I spoke very clearly in my heart, and I said, Srila Prabhupada, what am I doing here? Why am I here? Who are you? And he sat up by himself, and he couldn't do that at that point. And for like 10 minutes or more, a long time, he just looked at me and he spoke without speaking. And I heard his voice inside my heart, and he told me exactly what I was doing, why I was there, who he was, and what was happening. And when he'd finished, he lay back down as if nothing had happened, and again had to be moved and rolled over. And that was the last instruction he gave me. And it was like nothing I ever saw with Srila Prabhupada in all the time I was with him. It was honestly mystical beyond measure. You know, there was no way you could describe that as a normal interaction with anybody. And it was profoundly intuitive, and he defied all material logic by sitting up and doing what he did. And he sat bolt upright, straight, and stared, and didn't stop staring while he spoke without speaking like that. And it was very clear, very basic. There was nothing kind of odd or nothing mixed up with the madness of my mind in there. It was lucid. You know, you're the eternal servant of Krishna, and Srila Prabhupada was non-different to Vrindavan. There was no point of distinction between Srila Prabhupada's mood, his motive, and what Vrindavan was. They were the same thing. Everything made sense then. Seeing Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan was the most amazing thing. I'll spend many lifetimes coming to grips with that, I'm sure.
There was one conversation that took place with Srila Prabhupada in the fall of 1969 en route to a lecture at Conway Hall from where we resided at John Lennon's estate called Tittenhurst. I was present in the van that brought him there. Generally speaking, only the driver and Srila Prabhupada sat in the front of the van, and they were bucket seats. And then the back of the van was left empty, just the metal floor. So I was sitting with my back leaning against the back of his seat on the floor, chanting japa. We had been en route some time. It was very dark by then, and Srila Prabhupada said just loud enough for me to hear, "When I leave this body, see that it is taken around Vrindavan on a palanquin on parikrama." It was so short. It was just a sentence out of the dark and the night, and very stunning to me because I was absorbed in japa, something Srila Prabhupada had never mentioned and I'd never thought of. So I rose to my knees and leaned over so my head was just even with his shoulder. And I said, "Srila Prabhupada, why are you telling me this? Better you tell this to Tamal Krishna, because he has more capacity to see that it is done than I do." And Srila Prabhupada paused briefly and then said, No, you can tell him. And fell silent. And I too fell silent. So that this came to pass is very salient and so important, because while I did mention that to Tamal Krishna sometime after the conversation, it wasn't something that we spoke about in subsequent years. So that it happened through whatever arrangement of the devotees there means that Srila Prabhupada's wish was fulfilled, and so many Brajbasis were able to pay their respect to Srila Prabhupada in this traditional way.
Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Yami Benam Kanmantang Aravinda Dalayataksham Benam Kanmantang Aravinda Dalayataksham Barahavatang Samasita.
As we went from one place to the other, people were performing arti, offering flowers, offering prasadam. Just, all of Vrindavan was displaying their love and affection for Srila Prabhupada. And then finally we brought him back, and then we prepared to put him in the samadhi. And the thing that amazed me is that Srila Prabhupada had left the night before, and now this was almost noon of the day after. So this has been a significant amount of time. And of course, for an ordinary man, within an hour or two, rigor mortis sets in, and the body gets stiff like a board. But Srila Prabhupada, his entire body remained not stiff at all. It was completely loose. Every joint, every part of his body was loose and completely flexible. There was no mottling, no settling of blood in the different areas of the body that happens to people, the ordinary persons who die. There was no odor. And we had undressed him again and prepared him to bring him down into the samadhi, and his body was still fragrant. Every symptom was that of a greatly advanced Mahabhagavat, completely pure, completely Brahman, completely spiritualized, who had achieved Mahasamadhi.
Kannatpakoti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Chintamani.
He was carried on a chair, sat under the tamal tree for darshan of the deities. And we could all tell it wouldn't be long. This one day, Prabhupada had this magnificent garland on. And for a moment I looked at him and I thought, oh, I wish I had that garland. And immediately I felt so horrible. I felt, here's your spiritual master, and look at him, and you're wanting something from him? And I started crying. I was so ashamed. I went to the corner of the courtyard and I couldn't stop crying. At that moment, Vrindavaneshwari, my daughter, was 2. She went over to Prabhupada spontaneously, paid her obeisances. And as she was getting up, Prabhupada took the garland off and placed it on her. She ran over to me and immediately put it on me. I have that garland today. I've dried it. I've sewn cloth around it. And that garland is being used when we're in the company of different individuals who are leaving their body, they wear that garland. So Prabhupada's mercy is very far-reaching.
The Samadhi ceremony was going on. Narayana Maharaj was organizing. One or two of his assistants were there. Bharadraj was leading that kirtan. I was having the kartals. Nitai Chand was playing the mridanga. And a few hundred devotees were chanting. And then, of course, after Prabhupada was placed there, salt was surrounded underneath and on all sides to form an antiseptic cover for the transcendental body of Prabhupada. And then soil was thrown in. I was also fortunate to throw some soil on top. It is said in the CC during that Samadhi ceremony of Haridas Thakur that anyone who throws soil into the Samadhi of a pure devotee will be liberated, will go back to Godhead. So I was thinking, even here we're getting Prabhupada's mercy. Of course, there'd been an Abhishek of Prabhupada just prior to his entering the Samadhi, and then the Abhishek water came out, and I was fortunate to get about a liter of it, which I drank. I kept a small quantity in some small bottles. So I was able to throw soil into the Samadhi and at the same time drink the Charanamrita.
The hole which was dug for placing Prabhupada in Samadhi, the devotees had stayed up all night excavating that hole. There was a little roped off area and we were all just pressed up against this rope watching. Of course we didn't know what was going on, but we watched, and gradually Srila Prabhupada's transcendental Sri Vigraha became covered, and then it really started hitting me that this is the last time that I'm going to see Srila Prabhupada with my eyes. And then I just broke out weeping and weeping. And that was the completion. They poured the earth on top of the Samadhi, and I remember going back to my room, sitting down in front of one of the favorite pictures I kept of Srila Prabhupada, and I just did my own little Guru Puja for Srila Prabhupada. And then after that I just collapsed, took rest, and got up a couple hours later, and there was a whole ceremony going on of different speakers coming and glorifying Srila Prabhupada, and then after that there was a huge feast, and all the residents of Vrindavan came, and thousands of people were fed with prasadam in Prabhupada's honor.
I witnessed the transference of Srila Prabhupada from his manifest to his unmanifest pastimes. I witnessed Prabhupada's final parikrama around Vrindavan. I witnessed Prabhupada's interment in his Samadhi in Vrindavan. And I also witnessed the installation of the Pushpa Samadhi in Mayapur. And to this day, you could tear my soul from my body, but you could not separate me from the conviction that Srila Prabhupada is completely embodied in his books, and that he's fully present in his Samadhis in Mayapur and Vrindavan, and that he's present wherever his devotees are sincerely trying to carry on his mission.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.
Considering his last will of going around Govardhan, his followers, his disciples, did take Prabhupada, the small brass murti of Srila Prabhupada, which was first taken to Radhakund and bathed with Radhakund water. And there was a procession around Govardhan Hill. Hundreds and hundreds of devotees and friends and well-wishers, followers of Prabhupada. We went performing Govardhan Puja. Prabhupada was on the mind of all of us, so we were carrying Prabhupada on our minds and in our hearts, so how could Prabhupada not be there? He was very much there. Prabhupada, his mission of preaching, he wasn't thinking of stopping at any time. He was just unstoppable. His desire to spread Krishna consciousness was so intense. He was dead set. If you talk of determination, he's a personification of great determination to spread Krishna consciousness, and he exemplified that by his last will of going around Govardhan. Wasn't a drama for him. He wanted to go. He wanted to go on a bullock cart and travel or do some preaching or programs if possible. The night before he was appealed to, please don't go, don't go. And the next day he comes up with this bus program. Take me on the bus. Take me out of here. I want to be in the field, be with the public. Let me die on the battlefield, preaching, battling with Maya. So he was trying to make his followers understand his spirit, his determination to spread Krishna consciousness. And this is how he was preparing us or his followers, future generations, to go on till they reach every town and every village in the world. Like Prabhupada, he was so determined. He would not stop till Krishna consciousness movement reaches Nagaradi Gram Sarvatra Prachar Hoibe Mora Nam. So I think Prabhupada would be accompanying the preacher of Krishna consciousness movement who would be visiting the very last village on this planet, bringing the holy name there. The will power that he had, strong, strong will, which is only giving us inspiration to carry on spreading this Krishna consciousness movement.
When Prabhupada first came back in 1977, he gave a real intense lecture about Vani and Vapu, association through personal association or association through instruction. And I remember the intensity of that too, because we also had our teachers, despite the problems, they were pretty sincerely into this. I mean, why else would they give up their lives? So whenever Prabhupada would give these heavy lectures, they used to kind of go out of their way to make sure we got the point. And so I remember when Prabhupada gave that intense lecture, so many of you want to be around me physically, right? But the truth is when you associate with me through my instructions, it's much more effective and I'm much more pleased by it. Of course, we want Sangha with the sadhus and with the spiritual master, but he said the most important thing is to associate by carrying out their instructions, carrying on their mission. And I remember that too, and I knew what it meant. And then I've noticed even as an adult, a lot of projects I've done, the ones that were completely successful were when I've always had that attitude that somehow I'm with Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
When I first met him, I looked at him when I didn't know what to say, and I said, Srila Kinchana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj. And then he saw that I had a tape player in my hands. And so without my having to say anything, he just closed his eyes and he started tapping his hands together and he sang his Mangalacharanam, before singing Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And then he started singing Hare Krishna mantra. And it was like going into another world. He was chanting so beautifully, and it was like each syllable was just drenched in bhava and prema. And after about 20 minutes, he stopped. And then he looked at me, and he said, "I would like to tell you something." And I said, "What is that?" And he said, "I'm an old man, and I've had a lot of experience in this world. From my experience, I can honestly tell you that there has never been a greater acharya than your spiritual master." And when he said that, I became stunned, because he was a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Then he looked up and he said, "There's never been an acharya in history who has performed miracles like your spiritual master." And then he paused and he looked at me. He said, "Do you know why?" And, I was like so stunned. I couldn't say anything. And he said, "Because in history, there was never a greater servant of Sri Krishna's holy name than your spiritual master. Because your spiritual master had so much absolute understanding of Sri Krishna's holy name and so much absolute faith in Sri Krishna's holy name that he personally carried Sri Krishna's holy name through the length and the breadth of the world. Therefore, he is the greatest acharya who has ever existed."
Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Hare